One of the other big trends that probably should have been first on this list for you guys is HR applications. We've done a lot of HR software selections in the last 24 months, I would say. Companies are no longer satisfied with the HR applications that are tied in with their ERP. They're going to robust third-party HR applications. Some of them require payroll, be part of it. Some can tie into your existing payroll. Some have a time card application. Some allow for a tie-in with solutions like Austin Lane. So with ALMobile. So I think that, but the HR application is critical because of that diminished labor pool and the need to make the most of them and make sure they're trained, make sure they're certified, make sure they have vaccinations, vacation tracking, benefits admin. There's so much more. And it offers self-service, which most employees today like to have. So I think that the HR application is something that is probably in most contractors' future if you're not there already. So those would be some of the primary trends that I'm seeing today. Now, how do you make use, or how do you prioritize from so many choices? I think that there's certainly a hierarchy, and I've kind of borrowed the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs in this regard. I think that there's a fundamental base of technology that you need to have at the ready, and I'm calling that foundational. That would be things like ERP, payroll, time card, invoice routing, estimating and bidding. That's a pretty good start right there. Like, those need to be in place, well used, well established, and everybody trained. And that's a good start. Then when that's done, you can move to tier two. The first tier point solutions. So that would be HR, perhaps, fabrication, perhaps, equipment management, project management, some of those. These are baseline applications that most contractors need, and certainly high priority, not above foundational, but also kind of expected. Once those are in place, now we can move to second tier point solutions. These can be things that are tied in with the model. They can be, maybe there are some IoT technologies, drones, AR, depending on the type of organization you are, could be second tier. And then finally, things that I would classify as R&D. They have potential. They're intriguing. And you want to know more about them, but you're not ready to fully deploy. Exoskeletons, as an example. Data warehouse and BI, as an example. There are a number of technologies that are in that realm, telematics with equipment, that I think you should definitely be looking at and evaluating, but perhaps not to the exclusion of some of these foundational technologies. IT should be monitoring and helping, assisting with all of these initiatives, but they're really not the ones to drive it. These are driven by the business owners, business process owners. Now, a business process owner is a term that I don't know where that came from, but it's not bad. Think about CRM. Who's the business process owner in your organization for CRM? Leads and opportunities, bidding, pre-qualification, all of that work that gets done and could get done in CRM should be the domain of either an individual or a team, hence the name business process owner. And they're the ones who decide how much value is there to automate this process and what's it worth. And I think that that's who should be making the decisions about where you're at in this stack. And the reason I make a point of this with some organizations is I've probably been in a few too many meetings where people have been enamored by the shiny object of some new cool technology, and they don't have the most basic things done. They're still billing in spreadsheets. They don't do POs. They don't have good job costs. They're not forecasting. Change orders are in spreadsheets. I mean, that's just a set of examples, but I mean, when those things aren't really um, uh, ready and sufficient, then why are we looking at drones and IoT? It feels a little bit like we're getting too excited about new technology and not getting core things addressed. So that's the hierarchy. Now, I would say that even though I use some examples in here, each company should determine what exists in those different levels, and that can be helpful then from a planning perspective. One of the things that I like to talk about when addressing the idea of technology and particularly where it's going is the notion of alignment. For a very long time, 20 years, I would say, I used to see construction companies making decisions around software. They would go out and buy an ERP, then they buy estimating, then they buy project management, and it was just sort of always additive. And it always felt like it was a reaction to the marketplace. Oh, seems like everybody's getting project management systems, we better too. And there wasn't really a close correlation between what they were spending for software and what the business needed. Um, I don't like any technology unless I'm solving a problem. And I like good definition of the problem I'm trying to solve. So having alignment, knowing where the business is going and what's most valuable. For example, if you're a self-performed contractor and you've got a lot of labor, well, HR is going to be pretty important. Timekeeping and production tracking, productivity reporting, also important. T&M billing could be important. So I should be investing heavily in things that can make a strategic difference, give us a strategic advantage, and maybe be a little less focused on some other technologies, which are good and certainly, have a degree of value, but maybe aren't as so important because you have a limited pool of investment dollars and manpower to put on technology. So make it count would be the summary of all of this. I think that the also, in addition, when you look carefully at technology, you think about where you're headed, where you're going in the business, and that's going to determine what's the size and shape of your IT resources. What does your IT department need to look like? How big? What type of skills do you need? Because that will determine your success or failure with some of this technology. I think that one of the other missed opportunities you could point to in all of this is uh, uh, getting the organization aligned, getting them on board with technology and where the company is headed. I see too many companies where the front runners in the organization make a decision to move forward very quickly, and they're not wrong, but they don't look back to make sure they've got most everyone on board. And I think that's unfortunate because then you're running alone instead of with the organization. Now, does that mean you have to have 100% buy-in? Absolutely not, and you won't. There are the technophobes, as we like to call them, who just don't like technology, don't like change, no thank you. And that group will be present in almost every organization, but their impact, their drag, if you will, on the organization can be kept to a minimum. And that's what we like to see. We like to support the front runners in an organization and that sort of middle of the curve, of the bell curve, that really does so much of the work in the organization. So be mindful of this, of the minority that are in the back, so to speak, who aren't progressive, who aren't wanting to change, but don't let them dictate the strategy, dictate the direction. I think good change management practices can be very helpful as the organization makes their way through adoption of new technology. We end up as a firm helping many organizations with change management approach and technology or approach because it's overwhelming and the stakes are very high. So companies have definitely embraced the idea of change management as an imperative in any of these initiatives. I also think it's important, and you probably hear me say it more than once, this notion of competitive advantage. You definitely want to be mindful of where you're at, where you're gaining competitive advantage. I mentioned the self-perform contractor, but let's say you're a civil contractor with a large fleet of equipment. Well, then your competitive advantage is in managing that equipment fleet and keeping the cost down and the utilization high. So what technology do you have deployed to help with that? Is it GPS, telematics, better maintenance management? You know, what are the technologies that you're using to make sure you have optimized equipment? If you're heavy civil, that's key. Also, if you're heavy civil, you've got to be focused on trucking, material management, material buying, manufacturing. So again, deploying the technology in line with where the business is key. So I mentioned the example of self-perform contractors. What should they be focused on? Well, that would be the production and productivity, getting data in, production data and man hours into ALMobile, and then being able to provide feedback to the guys in the field around productivity and forecasting is tremendous. And I mean, the ALMobile solution is great for that and should be leveraged. Keeping up with equipment and tools, another key metric for self-perform contractors. Fabrication and modular building is probably one of the things you're going to be encountering here in the near term, making sure that your systems support that. Strong procurement. Too many contractors don't have strong procurement, and it leads to problems down the road. Accounts payable can't be efficient. Discounts get missed because we can't pay on time. We don't get full shipments, and then we get too much in the way of committed cost. There's just too many problems with procurement if you don't have purchasing well deployed. Scheduling, certainly. One of the things that I've seen that big self-perform contractors have is this concept of a production coefficient, if you will. And that is basically the man hours budgeted divided by the actual man hours. So if you had, for the amount of work you did, you had 10 man hours and you used 10 man hours, 10 divided by 10 is 1. So optimal is a 1. And then anything that's over that would be, would represent poor productivity, and anything under that would represent positive productivity. And the reason we do that is because then a foreman or superintendent can look down at a report, a productivity report, just looking at 1.0, and anything that's above that is called out to their attention. Anything below that, somebody's doing a good job. So having that kind of quick read on daily production can be tremendously valuable in terms of planning work and not letting the jobs get away and finding out a week later, 2 weeks later that we have a labor problem.